Hey everybody and welcome back. A couple weeks ago, I posted a video talking about the results of a survey I created in May. Just as a recap, this first page here is the overall scoring of the 12 marriage candidates in Stardew Valley. In the original video, I briefly touched on how sexuality affected spouse choice, and I made a video about age as well. There are links to both of those in the video description. Today, I'm going to compare the spouse rankings between people who answered the survey as men and women. Now, we had a wider spectrum of choice available than just those two, and you'll be able to see why I narrowed it down when I get to the next page. Before we start though, I just want to say thanks for checking this out. It's awesome that people are interested in these videos. I think they're super fun. If you do like the video, consider subscribing to the channel. Right now, only about 22% of my view time comes from subscribers, so if you dig this kind of stuff, ring the bell and I'll keep it coming. And if you really like this, there's even a cheeky link to my Patreon in the video description. With that out of the way though, let's get into some stats. Let's take a look at men first. That's my first tab, and yeah, let's just start off. So the reason that I'm only looking at men and women today is because I wanted to break it down a little bit further here. So I have like asexual men, bi, pan men, and I'll talk about that in a second too. And what I noticed was that I had people who would, say for gender, non-binary or other, and then for sexuality, heterosexual or homosexual. And I don't know that person, and I don't know what non-binary or other means to them. And so I didn't want to, make any claims that I didn't think were true, so I left those out. I didn't want to misrepresent, so I chose to not represent. So apologies for that. There is going to be a little bit less data here than we saw with like age, just because I don't want to say like you're part of this group when you may not be, and I just don't know. So you can let me know what you think about that in the comments. I just didn't think that there was a great way to kind of manage that. In the future, though, I do have an idea that could be like, in Stardew Valley, the spouses are presented as either men or women. Are you attracted to the men, the women, both, or neither? And that could be a way to kind of not run into this exact same situation next time. So leave me suggestions. I'm always learning from these, and I really do appreciate all of the feedback. You're never going to hurt my feelings. You might. be kind, but let me know what I'm wrong about, because it's good for me to learn. So anyway, with that said, the other thing here is that I understand, that bi and pan are not the same thing. For the purpose of my survey, though, like I said, men and women are the genders that are presented to us in Stardew Valley for the spouses. So I felt that it was appropriate to combine them. Again, not an expert, let me know, but that's the way that I did my stats, just so that you know. With that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about men overall. I had 305, and that includes anyone that answered that they were a man, that they answered their sexuality, and they also answered a spouse. If you left any of those blank, I just pulled your info out, just because if I don't have all three of those answered, it doesn't really help me. So we'll see 305 here. I think we're just under 800 for the women, and that means that there's about 300 and a half. I don't really know, but there were about 1,500 people that took the survey. So some people are not going to be included in this, and I apologize. I just didn't know how to do that appropriately. Anyway, men overall, we have Leah and Abigail out in front, and then Penny, who I kind of thought floated around the middle, but well, I guess this is kind of floating around the middle, but in third place is pretty good there. And then Haley, and then Sebastian, and then Shane. So that's pretty interesting, but that's not going to hold true across all of our different subcategories, which was why I wanted to break things down more. For example, asexual men, and this is a very small sample group for 23 people. It's almost not even worth making the graph, but I didn't want to just do 3, so I did it anyway. For age, if I had a group this size, I actually just wouldn't do it. So take this with an enormous grain of salt, because it's probably not representative. But we have Sebastian and Maru tied for first place here, and that is the only place that Maru does that well. Spoiler alert, you'll never see that again. Pretty interesting. And then Leah, Harvey, and Elliot. Alex, no love for Abigail, no love for Sam. So that also is a little unusual. The Abigail part, not the Sam part. Sorry, buddy. Looking at bi and pan men, we have Abigail out in front at almost 19%, and then Sebastian and Leah come in close behind, and that's more what I expected. Seeing Abigail out here in front, though, is interesting because we didn't necessarily see that when we looked at all votes, you know? So it's interesting to see where her strength is coming from, because she did okay. But it is pretty cool to see where people come in first when they weren't necessarily like surging up the charts overall. Gay men, and this was one of the reasons that I wanted to do this. I had a great comment, and I don't know who it was. I'm sorry. I would love to give you credit. I just couldn't find your name. I was digging, and I apologize. But somebody said you should break it out by gay men and lesbian women, because I had stats on people that indicated homosexual. And they said Alex is going to kill it in the gay men section. And apparently that person was pretty correct, because we're looking at Alex with a 25.4% vote here. However, not a commanding lead, because Shane is at 23.8. And Shane is kind of an oddball. Like, he's up and down and all around. Like, people tend to marry him early, and then he's not their favorite, as we've discussed a couple of times. So interesting to see him do so well here. And if you have feedback on that and you're part of this group, you know, let me know. Or if you're part of any group, let me know. Why do you like Shane? Or why do you don't? Or for that matter, anybody here. And then straight men, this is where a lot of our other Abigail votes came from. So we see Abigail does well in both of these sections. And then Leah also doing pretty well here. Sebastian was in second place for our bi and pan men. Definitely not for our straight men, which makes sense. And then we see some Haley, some Emily, some Maru. I don't know if I mentioned Penny, but doing pretty well here. Interestingly enough, we do have a couple of dudes down there, and that's something I want to hit with my like key takeaways. Asexual men, the only group of these two pages to rate Maru as tied for, with a little asterisk. First place, tied with Sebastian. Again, though, that's such a small sample that this is 4 votes. So probably not representative, like I said. Straight and bi and pan men liked Abigail the most, but gay and asexual men, some of you selected Leah, which ended with Leah outscoring Abigail by a single vote. So even though that might not be somebody that you are romantically or sexually attracted to, you still voted for Leah to push her out ahead of Abigail, which I thought was awesome. Sam was easily the least favorite across men's voting, with 5 total votes out of our 305 here, 1.6%. And then Elliot did not do very well with the men at all, with 11 votes, 3.6%. But Sam with only 5. Yikes, that's pretty brutal. And this I just touched on, but gay men were more likely to vote for a woman as their favorite marriage candidate than straight men were to vote for a man. And this, it doesn't go here. It needs to go like right there. There we go. That's really important to nobody but me. But yeah, pretty interesting. We see 11.1% of our survey takers that identified as gay men voted for a woman for their favorite spouse or marriage candidate, right? And then we had some straight men who voted for a man as well, but the number was a little bit lower. So I thought that that was pretty interesting. We'll see if that holds true for our women, because that's where we're going next. Women overall, we had 787. So yeah, that's what I thought. Just under 800. So like I said, we missed out on a few people just because I didn't want to categorize people into groups where they didn't belong, because I don't have enough knowledge. So, and again, I combined our bi and our pan women, and I understand those are absolutely not the same thing. But in Stardew Valley, when the marriage candidates are presented to us as either men or women, I felt comfortable doing it for the sake of this survey. But let me know. Not going to hurt my feelings, like I said, as long as you don't try to hurt my feelings, I guess. So, moving on. Women overall liked Sebastian, and we already knew that. Like, we already saw that, so that's not really a surprise. Harvey did quite well here at 14.2%, and then Leah just barely behind Harvey. So that's pretty interesting. This is where Elliot starts to shine, though. Elliot at almost 12%, and then we have Shane at about 10, and everybody else is just kind of hovering around the bottom of the barrel. So we have some highs, and we have some lows. And if we go back to men, they're not the same, which makes sense, but it's cool. I mean, to me. As far as our asexual women went, there were 80 of you. Sebastian won here pretty handily, I would say, with Elliot coming in second, Shane in third, and then Harvey down in fourth. And everybody else kind of crowded around together, except for Alex, who's right at the bottom. So, makes sense. I mean, you guys know who you do like, and you know who you don't like. And I think for the men, a lot of them were that way. Yeah, they kind of look that way, other than for our straight men. This is kind of up and down a little bit. And then for bi and pan women, we see Sebastian out ahead again, interesting. And then Leah at 18.9. And then Harvey coming in at 13, so third place here. And then it all falls off with Shane being our next one, but not a huge chunk of votes for Shane there, I would say. However, this was the largest individual group of these four, so the numbers that we see here are going to influence, this women overall total pretty heavily, and also just the total votes. Like, a lot of them came from this group and from this group. Like, our second biggest group for women was straight women, and that was almost as big as our overall men polling. So just keep that in mind when we see some of the numbers skew in different ways. There's a lot of representation here. As far as lesbian women go, Leah by a country mile, 30.9%, more than doubling Haley, who was our next one up. And this was another one, like I had a comment where someone had told me that Alex would do very well with gay men. I had a few comments that said Haley would probably do quite well with the lesbian women. However, I don't think I was ever in doubt that Leah would absolutely blow this one away, and that does seem to be the case here. Though Haley did, take second place here and did quite well, Leah's just very, very popular. Nothing for Alex, nothing for Harvey. Poor Sam with a big old goose egg. Didn't do super well with the bi-pan women either. Maru only had 1.9% with our bi-pan women. But back to lesbian, sorry, I was just backtracking. And then Shane here actually got no votes. And that might be the only place where Shane got no votes. That is literally the only place where Shane got no votes. Pretty cool. And then for our straight women, 282 of you, we had 23.4% voting for Sebastian, which is no surprise. Harvey doing quite well here with 19.9%. And then Elliot. This is our Elliot representation. Our asexual women and our straight women love Elliot. Or at least they think he's the best option. One of them, I should say. Not even the best. But we have a lot of votes for Elliot here, and it seems like they're just primarily coming from these two groups. We do have Shane here as well at about 12.8, so almost 13%. So those are kind of our big four, but not necessarily the same depending on where you look. So if you just looked at the overall stats, which is more what I covered earlier, it doesn't tell you as much about why or who, I guess, more so than why. Some key takeaways for this one that I noticed: Sebastian absolutely blew this one away, which was no surprise to me, except for lesbian women. Where he actually came tied for third. So that is pretty interesting. And I'll actually skip down to the bottom here and just say lesbian women here were more likely to vote for a man as their favorite at 16.4% than straight women were to vote for a woman at, 14.2. So it was actually not too far off. But again, we see, like we did with our gay men, we see our lesbian women more likely to vote for someone that they may not be, attracted to. So, pretty interesting. And then Harvey. Harvey actually ended up getting second place here, right after Sebastian. Not right after him, but which was interesting because he only scored as high as second place. So he's at 19.9 here, and that's second place. But over in our bi-pan women group, he is in third place. In our asexual women group, he is actually in fourth place, and he got no votes from our lesbian women. So a little bit of an underdog story there, coming in second place despite kind of the handicap. Probably the biggest reason for that is because our lesbian women group with 55 people was the smallest group here. So despite voting really hard for Leah, there just weren't a ton of people. And then Maru got a low 17 votes overall, but still didn't do as poorly here as like Sam did on the other side. However, because we had more women participating, Maru ended up overall with one more total vote than Sam. Or Sam. Why don't we like Sam? Like, I don't really, I'm not high on Sam, but like, do we not like Sam? I don't know. Tell me about it. So yeah, just some thoughts, some info here. Let me know though, you know, what did I miss? What do you have questions on? Because I could still do a couple things with this. I probably have only about one more video that I want to do. And then after that, if something really jumps at me from the comments, I might work on it. Otherwise, I might start working on cleaning up the data set and releasing it in case anybody wants to take a look at it. And then maybe I'll start sitting down and thinking about how I want to do round 2 of this. I think it might be a little early to start doing that, but maybe we'll dive into some different questions. Because I think this stuff is so interesting. I just love to see what groups are represented and what the population looks like for the people that play Stardew Valley, you know? So, if you had fun, drop a like, leave me a comment, whatever it is, and you know what? I will hope to catch you in the next video. Thanks, everybody!